I kind of have a bit of a, I should say, ambivalent feeling towards this. I don't think it's just a question of money. I think there is more structural issues. I'll give you an example. This is a picture from the Chinese market on social platform, social media, right? Can you see, guys? Right. So, China, of course, is a very huge country. We all know that. But I would say that China, compared to the Chinese venture capital market, compared to the venture capital market in the US, is most likely like, I don't know, completely out of proportion. But still in China, they are able to come up with what I would consider a huge portfolio of platforms and offerings in this market. Of course, now Europe is not as large as China, but I would say we are also more developed than China. So is it really just a question of not having enough venture capital, that we are not like able to compete in this amount of platforms and stuff with, for instance, the ones in the US? I have my doubts, frankly speaking. I don't think that it's only just a question of getting more venture capital in it. I think it's more also a structural reason. Yeah, we also heard yesterday, and I found that very interesting, I wasn't aware of this, that obviously the investment of venture capitalists in ICT startups or web startups in the US is declining. From this gentleman who was talking on privacy, he mentioned that. Also quite interesting indicator. So again, for me, I don't think, just to wrap this up, that it's just a question of having more venture capital in Europe. I think we really have to rethink maybe structural-wise also our approach to research. So, talking about approaches, I would like to get back to one thing that was discussed yesterday too. It was the future inter-public-private partnership. I mean, there was a question for a small research unit, is it the right thing for you to be there? Yeah, what's the potential of it? Is it like large enough? Is it small enough? Whatsoever? Frankly speaking, after now being involved in this for 2 years, no, well, 5 years in total, 2 years in operations, I believe the FIPPP was a very courageous move, and it was the right move to do. Right move, for instance, because it has the right scope. I mean, if you look at the PPP as it is today, it reflects the whole Challenge 1, for those familiar with the work program. So it's not only about networking, it's not only about software and services, it's not only about privacy, it's not only about the IoT, but it was essentially kind of like a consolidation of all of these topics. But not only the right scope was chosen from my perspective, it was also the right principles. It's consolidation of the ICT sector. I firmly believe that there will be, like say in the midterm, no clear separation anymore, or maybe there is not even a clear separation anymore between the telco sector, the software sector, the whatever smart device sector, whatsoever. I think this is all converging. And if you look at the future in the public-private partnership, in particular in the foundation project, Byware, you can find it. You see companies from the whole spectrum of the ICT sector working in one big one project. Of course, with all the respective products, right? Another issue is, of course, another, let's say, right principle of the FIPP, in my perspective, is this whole thing about non-ICT, ICT collaboration. If you look at the FIPP program, it was the first program, at least first research program that I would know, where really the non-ICT sector was brought together with the ICT sector in a program notion. And I think this program notion is really a huge value. Because I mean, we know that, and I have seen many motivational slides in the past regarding future research, also from Joao, for instance. I mean, there is roughly 90 to 100 European research projects ongoing in parallel, which all carry this future internet flag. And the companies are here and there, and I was in SAP, and SAP research at that time was very active in European research. So you are in 60 projects, or 40, 20, 30 projects whatsoever. And in each project is 2 or 3 FTEs maybe, or even less. So how can you make a strategy out of this? You have to deal with a huge fragmentation. So again, the FIPPP with this idea of consolidating, bringing the players together in a larger context was for me the only right move and the right thing to do. Then another principle of the PPP that was important was technology reuse. As you may know or recall, I mean, one of the basic principles of the Fireware project was that technologies that already existed, exactly out of these many, many research projects that were ongoing, were brought into the project and were supposedly to be matured in the project and taken to the next level beyond what we usually do in like, the small scale research projects compared to the FIPPV, for instance. Yeah, so the result, the clear objective was software, and there was this kind of triple use, useful, used, and what was the one? Usable, useful, and used, exactly. So that was what we kind of like the credo that we were setting out when we set up FireWare at the time. And another, I think, very valuable principle of the FIPP was, of course, large-scale demonstration. So, and we see that now. I mean, in the FIPP now we come to a point where technology is there, where there are dependencies between projects, where there's a real customer and consumer provider relationship, fiber to the use case projects. And that brings a whole lot new kind of like, ambition to the program, and also kind of like friction, of course. Because use case projects now come to the FireWare project and say, look what you develop, I have to use. Not only in the program, but also beyond. So if you ask me, retrospectively, knowing all the issues, of course, that we have in the FIPP, it was really the right thing to do, and it's still the right thing to do. But of course, I mentioned it already, there's also problems. So for me, the FIPP is also truly European. If you look at it, I mean, Europe, we all know that one of the issues that we have is that we first think about maybe our municipality, then we think about our maybe state or county, and then we think about the country, and the last thing we think about is Europe, right? In many cases. We have a very similar thing in the FIPP. If you are in this huge program, you deal with this many persons, like there's 150 partners, and each partner has like maybe 6, 7 persons involved in this project. The first thing you see is people think about themselves, their own career, then maybe about their teams, then their units, then their departments, then maybe about the partner, then maybe about the project, and the last thing they think about is the program. Right? So it's just a natural consequence. It's something we have to deal with, and I think this is one of the #1 things we have to address also in the future. When you have the program chair here, there was, significant change over the last couple of months, where we're really addressing, in particular, this aspect of more heterogeneity, more, homogeneous, more program, less project vision. Openness. I put that forward because we had this comment yesterday. Latif, I think you were asking, or this lady, whether they should be in the PPP is the right thing. I mean, if you consider the ambition of the PPP, which was about to reflect challenge 1, and then there's like 600 million euros, and you still have to get like SMEs involved in the third stage. I mean, you cannot get anyone involved in such a program, right? It's like, there's so many partners out there, there's so many academic institutions, it's impossible. I mean, the space simply is not large enough, even though the money, of course, sounds huge, to really involve anyone. So it's a kind of restricted set, and it's also good like this. What was wrong was most likely the expectation management. I mean, I think the biggest mistake ever done was to come forward and say, look, there is maybe a $500 million euros, right? Maybe. And look, guys, now come up with a proposal. And I've seen a similar issue now in the FED community. I don't know if you know about these FED flagships. They came up with a kind of similar approach, where they were saying we need this like large-scale approach to science whatsoever. And they were even saying there's 1 billion euro of a 10 years horizon. And I was really surprised, because I was involved in the FIPP from the beginning, and I saw all these kind of issues that we had with these big expectations, and then everyone trying to get in, and this kind of like, movements and grouping, and everyone trying to kind of get a stake. And the FED community seemed to have completely ignored the issues that we got due to this approach in the FIPP context, and has completely repeated it. I mean, there was the same like lobbying, the same issue, the same grouping, the same quarrel between partners and constitutions and whatsoever. And at the end, I mean, the future ICT flagship proposal failed exactly for the same reasons as, or for the same issues that we see them in the preparation of the FIPPP. So expectation management is one thing if you have these very huge programs, which I believe really need to be different in the future. Then there was this question about leadership. Should there be more leadership? Has there been the wrong leader being picked for the PPP? Or should the Commission have more of a role here? I mean, my question is there really a leader in European research projects or programs? I mean, you are a coordinator, right? It's called coordinator for a reason. You cannot go in there and you can say, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, right? There's like, one thing I learned in SAP is there's a big difference between coordination, management, and leadership. A coordinator is at the bottom of the chain. He's kind of like, you know, maybe it's good if you can do this, and maybe it's good if you could do this, and maybe here you have a gap, you have some time. Then there's a manager, which is more of an administrative role, which is kind of like, well, you know, we need to do this planning, and we have this budget, and we have this thing. And then there's a leader. And the leader says, I'm here today, and I want to be there in 10 years, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this. Right? And we don't have this in European research projects. You cannot come in a big European research project like Fireware as a leader and dictate to other partners what they are supposed to do. You have to work with them in a team. And of course, in such a big project, that's an issue. It's not easy. It's a big challenge. You know, program level is even more of a challenge. Another issue, of course, the role of the EC. What is it? It's a tricky question. One recommendation that I would have, in particular, would be that we would have a stronger push on open source technologies. I mean, the whole exploitation thing is a little bit vague, too vague from my perspective. And we saw that in, when we proposed, in the first phase of the FIPPP, we already talked about open source, like making things open. In Fireware, we have now open specifications, but we don't have open implementations. And these are all kind of like hurdles on the way if you really want to build something that is being taken up large scale. So that should be a much, much stronger requirements that result in European research projects. And I have made this proposal, for instance, if they are not being taken up within 2 years by a company, like a 2 years horizon, they should be automatically default back to open source. Full stop. Right? And then at least you have a chance that they are being taken up by some academics or whatsoever. But unfortunately, we see it too frequently that results in European research projects kind of like, you know, if they are not being taken up in the company, they end on a CD and on the shelf. Focus of the FIPPP is also one of the issues that was discussed. When you talk to people about what's the FIPPP, they will tell you the generic enablers. So essentially, if we kind of accept this, then the FIPPP is Fireware. Then we should not call it FIPPP, then we should just talk about Fireware. It's interesting if you do a simple calculation. Fireware has 80 million euros for 3 years, right? So this is compared to 8 times 5 million plus now 5 times 13 million or even 20 million for the use case projects. So the use case projects, if you consider them jointly, have a way larger budget than the Technology Foundation project. But who talks about the specific enablers? Everyone wants to have the generic enablers being open source, publicly available, public specification, whatsoever. But who puts the same requirements on the specific enablers? Where can I go to and can say, I want to build an application? At the end, it's obviously about application enablement, right? In the whatever mobility sector, where can I go and can say, instant mobility, give me your specific enablers on top of the generic enablers? It's not possible. It was completely forgotten. People just tend to focus on Fireware and the platform and say the generic enablers is the PPP. From my perspective, a huge mistake. All right, so this was a bit my ideas and thoughts from yesterday. I would like to move on now to another topic, or to a slightly related topic, because we were talking about do we have the right means? Do we need venture capital, or is the FIPPP a good tool, which I kind of like favor, as you see? But I would like to give you a pointer to a tool, a funding tool in Switzerland, where you can see that you can achieve with public funding quite good and effective results, and that's the so-called CTI program. Does anyone know that? Okay, CTI is called Knowledge to Innovation is the translation. I don't know why they have the C in front, but it's a program in Switzerland, where in particular SMEs and universities as joint ventures can apply for funding up to 1 million Swiss francs for projects that are focused on uptake of innovative research results towards a product. The interesting part is when you write a proposal, you write it in our notion just from the back to the front. So you start with the impact. You have to explain in the first like 10 pages why your idea has an impact on the company. And this will be the #1 criteria the proposal will be evaluated. Then the second chapter is the technology innovation. The whole proposal is around 30 to 50 pages. You can submit it every month, and you will get the reply within 2 weeks, and you can start your project 3 to 4 weeks later. So just like, because people criticize this public funding and whatsoever, we have the tools. And really, this CTI thing is a very, very good tool. When I came to Switzerland 5 years ago, and now after 1 year, or 1.5 years ago, I went to the university, my biggest worry was whether I would be able to attract Swiss funding. Because I didn't have a network. I'm a typical like European child, did the PhD in Portugal, come from Germany, lived in Finland for a while. I was mostly used to European research projects. Today, it's completely the opposite. This tool is so effective for SMEs that I cannot tell you how many companies come per week to us and ask, could we do this together, could we do this together, could we do this together? So really, then of course, like in terms of efficiency, I told you the proposal process is extremely lightweight. The reporting process is even more lightweight. At the end of the year, you send a report is 1 page. That's it, right? And after 2 years, if you have a 2 years project, you will have a review after 2 years, kind of like, a final presentation. Of course, Switzerland is a rich country, maybe they can afford that, but it's also a question of trust, how much trust do you partners? And because the thing is supposed to really bring impact to companies, and you will have to present that what you did has an impact on the company, there's a kind of like, you don't want to spoil your reputation, right? So you don't need this very strict like reporting to make sure that you deliver. Yeah. So a very good program, research funding program, which I suggest that you want to have a look at and maybe a poster child. Okay, so much about like funding, overall research activities and whatsoever in Europe. So now let's talk a little bit about content. It's still a cloud session at the very end. So obviously I'm running a cloud computing lab, so I consider myself a cloud computing expert, so I will talk about cloud computing a little bit. And I've heard it today, is cloud computing the right thing to address? Is it for us, let's say, a topic that will support Europe, will be something that supports our industry and so forth? And what you hear many of us kind of like say, look, big data nowadays, cloud in the combination maybe is really something that could have a huge impact on us. The question is it a European strength? When you look at, after me now, I'm not as long in this industry like many of the established persons in the room, Luis, Joao, Latif, and so forth. So, but if I look just back in the time of my, let's say, short career, what I believe is we have a strong tendency in Europe, of course, towards telco, because that's where we're strong, right? The GSM was the big success of the European Framework Program, and then LTE, and we have the big companies, NSN, Alcatel, Ericsson, and so forth. And of course, a lot of the research framework program seems to be tailored to this kind of like tradition that we have. So big question, cloud computing now as the big topic. Is it something that fits and that will help the European industry? Well, I was asking this myself because in particular in the PPP, we had many of these discussions. I think Tassos mentioned it yesterday, one of the big issues with FIPP preparation was it's just to agree between the companies on what the PPP should be focusing on. Should it be more network oriented? Should it be more cloud oriented? Should it be more software and service oriented? So, question here, is cloud something for the telco sector where we are strong in? So what I did is kind of like as an exercise to really get a bit of a feeling. I went to the investor report to Deutsche Telekom from 2012, right? Just to see is what do they report to those persons that invest money in the company as their future strategy. What would you guess? Is it all about LTE and all about broadband and all about wire networks? Not really. If you look here, for instance, cloud computing, okay, it's T-Systems, but T-Systems was created by the Deutsche Telekom in particular to have an angle in the IT and software space. If you read this report, cloud services are it's like right out under broadband, the mobile communications. So, cloud computing obviously is something It has huge value for our core strengths and our telco players. So here again, from the same report, Deutsche Telekom claims they have around 90 data centers worldwide, 90 data centers, 60,000 servers, and they serve 2.6 million SAP customers. I mean, that's a number, isn't it? Yeah, 2.2 million SMEs who belong to their customer base. So this is a purely telco company? I wouldn't say so. I think they have a strong footprint already in the IT, software, and also cloud computing sector. And this is a KPMG report, which you can get. You can download it on the internet, it's for free, where they have an analysis which companies, or which telco companies, exclusively telco companies, do have a cloud computing strategy. Which telco companies do significantly invest in cloud computing? Again, you can download it. You can see here, there's all the big companies, here Telecom Italia, Telefonica, Verizon, BT, AT&T, yeah, Portugal Telecom here. Portugal Telecom has just a year ago launched something on cloud computing and public cloud storage, right? So I mean, our telcos are focusing on cloud computing. So now let's look at research. Is cloud computing something for our traditional, let's say, expertise, our traditional industry base? Obviously it is. But now you tell me why we focus on this. I mean, the next proposal is, we had that yesterday, an infrastructure PPP that focus on connectivity services. I mean, we all know that connectivity services are unsustainable over the long run. We need more applications and we need more services. And the only chance to really make, let's say, at least in my perspective, to bring connectivity services back to the big profits is to combine them with cloud computing. And for telcos have an offering, a service offering that is unbeatable by the Amazons, Googles, and so forth, because they will never ever have the network. And we have a project running on this, it's called Mobile Cloud Networking, where we exactly try to do this. And we try to bring the mobile sector and the mobile communications and combine them technically and seamlessly with the cloud computing frameworks. All right, smart cities was also a topic. There was something on topic, so a bit of a change of direction now. Is smart cities maybe something that, I don't know, is the big new business model? I mean, we heard this talk about machine to machine. Yesterday, I think you, Luis, had a bit of smart cities in your presentation also. I personally think smart cities has a huge potential because it's a very nice constellation. And I will, in 1 minute, make the link to cloud computing. If you look at cities, I mean, we all agree that we have kind of like this trend towards larger and bigger and more modern cities, right? That's why we also address this aspect of smart cities. And when you look at cities and you try to see what they feature, what makes them like particular, you can see they have all important ingredients. They have lots of people, of course, customers, but also maybe application developers. All these people have a local context, so they know a lot about the place where they live, right? The infrastructure typically in cities is quite well developed, right? Telecommunication infrastructures, data centers. So Zurich has, I don't know, 10 data centers at least in the immediate urban environment, right? What you do not have is you don't have a smart cities platform. If I want to develop an application today, right, and Luis from Santander kind of like pointed in this direction. If I want to develop an application for Zurich, using the infrastructure from Zurich, using IoT sensors, whatsoever, data centers there, using simply services provided for the particular context of Zurich, I can't do it. I need to go to a platform that is generic, maybe Google App Engine or Amazon or whatsoever, and then try to see if I can find some whatever island providers, a mobile device provider to get access to mobile device with its own platform, some services in the internet, maybe the open data platform from the city of Zurich, and I work with completely heterogeneous environments in order to build an application for a city. And that's something for me which is weird. So one proposal that I see is there should be dedicated platform as a services, for instance, for cities. Whereas a developer can go to and say, I find everything I need. Maybe I even live in the city, so I have all knowledge. I'm predestined to develop a useful application for the place where I'm living. I have the platform where I can develop the application, where I can run the application. I have access to data, open data, or maybe also data provided by enterprises. Right? I have access to a sensor cloud, and I can develop, run, and provide my application in the context of a city where I have also customers. So, proposal where cloud computing can fit for some smart cities at the end, right? Okay, so a few additional thoughts on cloud computing, and then I will close and hand over to the next speaker. Just a bit of research directions. One big issue in cloud computing that we have is APIs. Are we going for Amazon? Are we not going for Amazon? I don't know. There's these two fractions essentially. There's the AWS, Amazon Web Services. I guess you're familiar with that, right? So it's the #1 leader in the world on this. Exactly. They have their own APIs, and either you are compliant with it or you're not compliant with it. There's nothing in between. Open source corporation. I mean, OpenStack was founded exactly. OpenStack is the biggest open source project in the world at the moment to counter exactly this dominance from Amazon. Is this something? But if you look, I mean, the OpenStack kind of like qualifies in particular because they have very, very strong industry backing. But if you look at the like Platinum members, Gold members, the Platinum members, they spend $500,000 per year just to be in the board of OpenStack. There's hardly any European player. It's mostly Americans again, also the kind of the Asian players. Then cloud is of course like, you go away from this idea that you operate and you control everything yourself, right? It's kind of, you need to change a bit also, in particular from the telco sector. So you have to partner more with other players. So it's what we call a multi-sided business model, yeah? So which then of course like brings issues in when there is issues, yeah? So there's like, you know that, we all talk about this, Amazon is down. Yeah, so whose fault was it? The data center operator. Yeah, or was it the cloud computing provider? It's not always the same case. Right? Cloud Sigma in Switzerland, the startup which we have in our project, they are a cloud computing provider, but they don't run their own data centers. They go into colos. So incident management is definitely one of the issues. Connected to incident management, of course, is the question of SLAs, service level agreements. This is not really solved in this area. Another issue is federation. I think Tassos mentioned it yesterday already. There's of course more than one data center. They have their own operations. Yeah? You kind of like, how can you make use of all of them if they have disparate technologies? And finally, of course, one topic again, getting back to telco sector, that at the moment is like, I think, the beloved topic from all the telcos is SDN. So, but what I still ask myself is, okay, SDN is very good, but in the context of cloud computing, what are the real innovations? What are we using it for? I see all the cloud computing frameworks now coming up and saying, we have SDN support. Like OpenStack has the Quantum plugin, CloudStack is SDN ready, Eucalyptus has SDN support, but what are we doing it now with it? I do not really know any application that is really, where SDN is really used to optimize the operations of networks in the cloud. All right, so to wrap up, I believe we have the right programs in Europe. The PPP is a very good tool. It should be continued in particular in the area of cloud computing. There's still many research questions to be solved, and I'm looking forward to talk to you, discuss, and hear your opinions on it.